Rolling to Film 5D, the show about everything film and video with the Sony a7S II. I'm your host, Aaron Hemmick, and this week I gave you my 5 favorite features for the new Sony RX100 Mark V. So once again, I'm forgoing my scheduled episode about YouTube export settings from 2 weeks ago in lieu of both the a6500 and the RX100 Mark V being announced. These cameras are just true game changers in my opinion, and I definitely wanted to give you my thoughts. As always, quick disclaimer, this camera doesn't come out until a few weeks from now, so I haven't used it and I don't own it. So this video is just purely to give you the features that I'm personally most excited about. And in the case of the RX100 Mark V, I do actually own the RX100 Mark III, and I've used it as my B camera for a few years now. So I know a little bit about this lineup of cameras, but will the Mark V be good enough to sway me for an upgrade? Let's find out. My first favorite feature of the Sony RX100 Mark V is actually an older feature, the 4K. I've said this in previous videos. If a camera comes out today that doesn't have 4K, I just simply ignore it. We're at the point now where 4K and Ultra HD are no longer just marketing phrases. In fact, most TVs and monitors support 4K. So being able to produce 4K content, whether it be for YouTube or some other medium, is becoming increasingly important. Unlike the Mark IV, the RX100 Mark V oversamples by nearly 70%, downsampling a 5028 pixel by 2828 pixel image to the 3840 by 2160 4K or Ultra HD final video. Like the Sony a6500, this is done without pixel binning or linescaping, so aliasing is going to be basically non-existent and moire will be very minimal. Now I'm not actually sure if the Mark IV does the same thing or not. I'm pretty sure that camera had a full pixel readout, so let me know in the comments if that's the case. If I'm right, then the Mark V could potentially be better in low light as well as having more detail, which would be awesome. Now the 4K of the Mark V also benefits from my second favorite feature. This is number 2, the AFA mode and the hybrid autofocus with the 315 phase detection points and that 0.05 second focus acquisition, very similar to the a6500 from my video last week. But the RX100 Mark V is unique in that it brings to us this new autofocus feature called AFA. It's kind of like you have the AFS and the AFC, the first of which is the kind of single shot autofocusing system, and the second is for continuous autofocus, like for rapid shooting, like if you're doing sports photography or any other situation where your subject is moving. So AFA focus mode will seamlessly switch between both AFS and AFC depending on what you need in any given situation. I can't tell you how many times personally that I've missed a shot because I should have been in AFC when I was in AFS instead, and vice versa. Well, AFA should fix this issue since it will use AFC in fast image situations and AFS when taking something like a portrait just automatically. This new feature, combined with that industry-leading 0.05 second focus acquisition and 315 phase detection points that cover 60 to 65% of the entire 1-inch sensor, should make the RX100 a beast when it comes to autofocus for both photography and 4K video. This contrasts the 0.09 second autofocus acquisition with only 25 points from the Mark IV, with most of those points being right in the middle of the sensor, so not super helpful. And just a quick note on what the hybrid focus actually means in all these new Sony cameras. This system uses both contrast and phase detection. The traditional of the two being contrast, which overshoots the focus mark in either direction and then relocks based on contrast in an image. Whereas the generally faster phase detection uses specific pixels to measure the phase of light across the sensor to get its focus. Since phase detection doesn't track back and forth, it's much faster, and with the hybrid system combining both, we get the best of both worlds, not to mention that contrast detection has benefited a little bit from some of the faster camera processors. But enough about that super sweet autofocus. Let's move on to my third favorite feature about the RX100 Mark V, the 24 FPS image capture, which can process up to 150 pictures in a row without buffering. This is by far the fastest shooting camera in this price range, and I honestly can't think of any other consumer camera that actually shoots this fast. In fact, if you really wanted to, you could shoot at the equivalent of 6K resolution with this camera for 5 to 6 seconds at 24 FPS, which is just super cool in my opinion. And I'm sure someone out there is going to make a short film in 6K utilizing this feature on the RX100 Mark V. But on the subject of sports photography, given the 0.05 second focus acquisition and the hybrid autofocus system, being able to burst out 24 FPS photos means that you're likely going to get the perfect shot in the perfect moment. Whereas with the Mark IV, you only got 16 FPS. And it's funny that I say only 16 FPS because that's still crazy fast. Now, one thing that allows this camera to shoot fast is the utilization of an electronic shutter, the very same technology which allows you to shoot photos in absolute silence on a camera like my a7S II. If the camera only used mechanical shutter, then we would be limited to around 10 FPS is what I hear. I'm definitely interested to see the real world results of this. Will the pictures actually be sharp and in focus shooting 24 FPS? I guess we'll just have to wait and see. Now, my fourth favorite feature is the 1000 FPS video recording for 40 times slow motion. Now, the Mark IV also had this feature, and when that camera was announced, it was probably this feature that had everyone the most excited. I mean, if you think about it, you want your B camera, and this is generally going to be a B camera for most people, to be able to shoot all the niche things that your main camera can't. And for most people, that's slow motion. And for years, I've used a camera like the GoPro Hero series to achieve slow motion, but nothing like this. I mean, 1000 FPS in 1080p Full HD is just crazy and might be worth the price of the camera alone, to be honest, for some people at least. Now, the Mark V can record 1000 FPS for up to 8 seconds, which is more than double the recording time of the Mark IV. And keep in mind that these 8 seconds slowed down by 4,000% will equate to over 5 minutes of actual video footage. I think it's like 5 minutes and 25 seconds or something like that. So really the extra 4 to 6 seconds, the new model just kind of affords you the ability to expand the window of whatever action you're trying to record in a given time, like an object falling in a lake or something like that, to get that splash. You're just giving yourself more of a window to record that action. Now, just like the previous model, the Mark V utilizes the electronic shutter to be able to crank up that shutter speed for these super slow-mo shots. Both the Mark IV and V go up to 1/32,000th of a second, which is just crazy fast. And while traditionally you would just double your frame rate, so in this case for 1000 FPS you would do 1/2000th of a second, since you want your slow-mo to be ultra sharp and make sure you have as much detail as possible, you could potentially crank it all the way up to that max shutter speed for sure. And finally, my last favorite feature of the RX100 Mark V, the Bionz X image processor with front-end LSI. Now, I mentioned this in my episode about the A6500 last week, and honestly, I probably didn't give it enough credit. A lot of people are assuming that the Mark V will have the same exact image quality as the Mark IV. But taking a look at this test shot from Imaging Resource, you can see that the detail is significantly higher in the RX100 Mark V image on the left. Also, the camera seems to handle noise better, and this is due in part to the front-end LSI and faster processor. This will also result in less artifacting and less dramatic rolling shutter, because basically what a CMOS sensor does differently than a global shutter is it scans the image from the top down when you're doing something like a video. Well, if the sensor is bigger, it will of course take longer to scan, like on a full frame camera like my A7S II, which is why those generally have very terrible rolling shutter. But with these ever increasing speeds, that CMOS scanning process is becoming faster and faster, resulting in less rolling shutter and thus less distortion in your image and videos. And there you have it, my top 5 features for the newly announced Sony RX100 Mark V. Now let me know in the comments below which features you're looking forward to the most, and perhaps maybe some of the ones you wish Sony had included. Personally, I'm kind of disappointed that this camera has no touchscreen, no S-Log 3, you only get the S-Log 2, and no microphone jack, though that's the same for all the other ones as well. And while the 4K is awesome, it only records for 5 minutes at a time, so this is truly a B camera if you want to use it for video. And personally, as I showed you before, I do own the RX100 Mark III, and while I love this camera, I don't know that I really want to upgrade to this one. That slow-mo is definitely intriguing, getting that 1000 FPS, but there's just no situations where I really need that in my workflow right now. So I'll probably just stick with this one for now and get something like the A6500 instead as a B camera. But that's it for this episode. If you enjoyed this content, please show your support and like this video. If you have any questions, shoot them on over to me on Twitter at filmin5d, and I'll see you next time with my tips for YouTube export settings. Thanks for watching. If you haven't subscribed yet, hit that subscribe button on the screen for weekly content on everything film and video. If you want to learn more about the Sony RX100 Mark V, check out my blog on my website at filmin5d.com. And check out my video on the A6500 by clicking the video on screen. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time.